Today we are going to be talking about the natural disaster referred to as the 1931 China floods. These group of floods are one of the worst natural disasters with the highest death tolls ever recorded. By the August of 1931, three of China's largest rivers, the Huai, the Huang, also called the Yellow, and the Yangtze's water levels rapidly and dramatically rose. This resulted in flooding that covered most of central China, an area roughly the size of England and half of Scotland. Experts say this was at least twice the size of the flooded area in the Mississippi floods in 1927. The flooding was the result of multiple different reasons that can be simplified down into two categories. The first of these is the unusual weather leading up to 1931. China had a severe drought through the years of 1928 up to 1930, causing the water levels in the river to lower, exposing soil that then dehydrated. This drought abruptly ended during the 1931 winter when strong snowstorms covered the area. This continued into spring when the snowstorms turned into heavy rainfall. The rainfall in July was 0.61 meters or 2 feet. These storms turned extreme when, in July alone, China experienced 7 cyclones. That is 5 more than their average. The large amounts of rainfall and snowmelt flowed into the rivers and raised them to unprecedented levels. Records show that the Yangtze's river flow rose 10 feet above its average during that time of year. This is 3 feet above any previous record for that river. The second reason of the flooding is poor management of China's rivers. China experienced many instances of rebellions, wars, and political instability over the last decade. As a result, the government programs that were in control of maintaining the rivers were not able to do their job effectively. Dams and dikes were built incorrectly and were not able to hold the sudden levels of water. On top of this, recent advancements in agriculture left land overly used and the vegetation destroyed. There was nothing left to stop the rivers from overflowing and submerging most of central China. So now we know a bit about the factors that contributed to the 1931 floods, but what exactly was the significance of these floods? Well, exact numbers are hard to acquire, as poor record keeping both before and after 1931 made getting an accurate estimate of the population of the area particularly difficult. Despite this, experts were able to determine that around 50 million people were directly affected by the floods, with approximately 2 million total fatalities. At least 100,000 people died from the initial flooding alone. Flood-related diseases spread rapidly, and the mortality rates for infants and children under 5 years old were abnormally high. Within the affected areas of China, roughly 40% of the population had to leave their homes. With a million homeless, resources ran thin, causing many to be stuck stranded and without shelter. Within the refugees, there were many instances of infanticide, cannibalism, and the selling of women for food. These weakened communities and refugee camps were isolated, many even stranded, and with very limited resources of aid available, and the extreme difficulty to even reach the survivors, little relief could come from the outside. On top of this, the surrounding water made it impossible to bury the dead. All of this provided the ideal conditions for waterborne diseases to spread. Diseases were the cause of around 70% of the fatalities in rural communities and 87% of the fatalities in refugee camps. Records show multiple instances of many different diseases, including instances of malaria, severe smallpox, severe typhus, chlorea, amoebic and bacillarial dysentery, and many other gastrointestinal diseases. But that's not all. Millions of more people died from starvation. The initial flooding didn't stop with just decimating homes and businesses. It also wiped out the area's farms and food storages. Little food was salvageable, and even less was able to be provided through aid efforts. The land stayed flooded throughout the fall, making it impossible to plant new crops for the next year. There is no doubt that the floods were devastating and the stranded survivors difficult to reach, but that was not the only cause of the lack of aid resources. China did not have anywhere near enough people or resources to provide relief for all the refugees, so they appealed to other countries to provide efforts. Unfortunately, help didn't arrive until 2 months after the plea was made, and many countries didn't respond. Out of 21 countries making up the Health Committee, only 6 complied with China, and only 3 out of the 9 eastern countries making up the Advisory Council of the Singapore Bureau of the Health Organization responded.